Taking Care of Your Business is a series of programs to help small businesses succeed in Scottsdale. This program is presented by Scottsdale's Economic Development Department at 2 p.m. the first Friday of each month in the Eureka Loft, a free collaborative workspace at the Scottsdale Civic Center Library. Learn how to take care of your business at choosescottsdale.com.
All right, good afternoon. I'm Officer Kory Sneed. I'm a member of the Crime Prevention Unit for the Scottsdale Police Department. And thank you for coming today. And I want to kind of just give you a little explanation as far as what we do in Scottsdale. Is that we have 4 police districts in Scottsdale. Basically, we have the McKellips district, which is McKellips to Osborne. We have the downtown district, which is Osborne up to McDonald. We have the Violinda district, which is McDonald up to Cactus. And then Thompson Peak, which goes from Cactus north. And the reason that can really play into, especially all of the small businesses and our residents in our community, is each one of us has an area that we're assigned to allocate resources to help with whatever issue we may have. We have one crime prevention officer who is sworn in every district. We actually have a civilian called district police aide who goes through and reads every police report each week in our district. And we sit down every couple of weeks, come up with strategies, take a look at what's happening in our district and what can we do about it. So the one thing that we always want to kind of throw out is no matter really where you're located in Scottsdale, we can put a person in touch with you and come on out to your business, walk your property with you, talk about ways to make it kind of less of a target to maybe a wannabe criminal, and things that we can do, everything from looking at the orientation of the building to landscaping, and we'll talk about some of those things today. So thanks for coming. All right, the first thing I want to talk about objectives is we're going to talk about forced versus unforced entries, some of those things that we can do in our business, and take a look at the stats as far as commercial burglaries in 2013. We'll take a look at those that could have been prevented, and a lot of times, basically a crime's a crime of opportunity. It's something where someone sees that there's an unlocked door, unlocked window, maybe something left in plain view, maybe the back door is propped open on a business, and a lot of times we do things without thinking about the fact that if somebody that day has decided to commit a crime, they walk through our plaza, they walk by our business, could it become the target just based on the fact that we left that door open? Maybe we left those pallets outside, and then we created a step to get up and over the fence, and we'll talk about some of these things. So taking a look at burglary is basically commercial burglary is called burglary by the third degree, and what we're talking about is somebody who remains unlawfully in or on a commercial property or basically in a fenced commercial property or fenced residential yard. And one of the things is that they have to have the intent to commit a felony or a theft. They're in that property. If a person remains unlawfully on your property and they're not going to commit a felony or a theft, it could be criminal trespass. So we still have laws that apply to somebody who doesn't want to leave your business. And what we want our employees to understand is, especially if you have those problem customers, they typically have come in, they cause you issues or problems. We do have laws, once again, that we can address with those patrons to make them realize that they can't treat your business or you or your employees that way. Today we're going to focus on burglary and take a look. In 2013, we had 324 commercial burglaries, and what I want you to focus on is if you take a look at the first couple points of entry, doors and windows are the 2 main sources of entry. Now that's not too uncommon, and probably if I were to ask each one of you, you'd probably say doors and windows are probably going to be the target. What I do want you to take a look at though is 33% of those were unforced entries. And what that tells me and what it tells our officers is basically for the third of those properties that had a commercial burglary is either they were unlocked, maybe they had broken locks where somebody couldn't go ahead and secure that window, or it might have been open for business, or there just wasn't a sign of forced entry. So did somebody have a key? Did somebody gain access some other way? And so taking a look at that, if a third of those are no signs of forced entry, what could we have done maybe to prevent those and really drastically reduce the amount of commercial burglaries that we had? Also, taking a look at the forced methods of entry, when we do have forced entry, typically we look at what we call a window break or possibly a pry on the door or the window. Now, it's not too uncommon if we do see that we have a break that we can probably assume it's going to be a window break. If you think about windows on a property, it's probably going to be the weakest point of that building. So overall, a window break is probably a pretty easy target because comparing that to a door is that on a window break, there's going to be basically no opening of that door, which might set off the actual alarm on that building. So they could go ahead, actually throw something or break that window, see if an alarm goes off, make entry into the building, and at that point, then we have to talk about, do we have other systems in place to detect a person, maybe motion, glass break, things along those lines. So typically on a glass break, it's also going to be a much easier form of entry, is that it takes less time. If you think about your business and you think about and you walk your property, ask yourself, are there hidden spots within my property where I could be susceptible to somebody not being seen? Most of our businesses, especially with the front entryway, is that they're typically off of a main street or a side street where you do have maybe pedestrian traffic, maybe you do have some vehicles that are driving down that street, so they would be seen by the public. So what a suspect wants is they don't want to be seen. They want to make it a quick entry, they want to get in and get out. And so by trying to pry a door or force entry into a business, it takes a lot more time and there's greater chance that they could be discovered. Now, most of them are, like I told you before, is that they're looking for the crime of opportunity. Is there opportunists where they're going to look and see what is my gain, what is my benefit, and what is my risk? And so if they take a look and the risk is too great, meaning that you have done things to secure your business, you've taken actually things away from maybe as far as that asset goes, secured it behind a safe, maybe put it up in a locked storage facility, whatever you've done to secure those assets, if they don't see a gain to that risk of wanting to commit that crime, they're probably going to choose some other place. So what we want to do is minimize by looking at and kind of getting that mindset, where am I most susceptible as far as the entry goes? And then if they did make entry, what is it that they'd have access to? Sometimes, especially in our downtown area, or if you have a business that deals in things like jewelry, maybe artwork, is what access would they have and how long would it take them to get that if they did make entry into the business? And sometimes when we take a look at, especially display cases, should we take those display cases and put them in a safe at closing, or are we going to leave them out for people to see? And it's a tough thing with the retail industry because sometimes you do want people passing by to see what you have. You want them hopefully to come back at another time or actually step in the business and maybe make a sale. So there's kind of a balance between what do we do, especially at closing time, securing those valuables, but yet maybe giving enough out there that they can see what type of a business we have. So let's take a look, and we're going to talk about two things in particular today. We're going to take a look at target hardening, and we're going to take a look at CPTED, which is crime prevention through environmental design. The first thing we want to look at is doors. Most of the businesses that I deal with and that have seen and done a security assessment on either have a wood door or they have steel doors. Now, wood doors, there are benefits to it. Typically, you have pretty good insulation practices on there. You also have pretty good ways to design it according to your business, depending on what it is that you're selling and what the business design looks like as a whole. One thing that we want to avoid is hollow core doors. Hollow core doors typically are meant for the inside of the business. And here's one thing to keep in mind. If you have assets that you're protecting inside that business, or you have employee records, checkbooks, things that, once again, if somebody gained access into your business, could it be an issue of identity theft? Is if you have a hollow core door, would it be easy for somebody to force entry through that hollow core door and gain access to your servers, your paperwork, your employee information, and your assets? Or if we put a solid core door, even though it's on the inside of the business, to protect those assets, it makes it less vulnerable and much harder to get into that room. So even though, once again, we're looking specifically right now at external doors and ones that go outside, is we also want to keep in mind what assets are we protecting and what is it that we can do to prevent somebody from gaining access if they did get into our business. So we want to look for solid wood doors for the external doors, and we also want to talk about metal doors. Typically metal doors are going to be welded together. There's going to be some type of insulation foam in the middle of it, could be a styrofoam. You also want to take a look at is if the door is hollow, since it is metal, it's still going to provide adequate security. We see a lot of businesses where they maybe have gone into an old building. They will put some really nice architecturally designed doors on there. It could be windows and a lot of things to go with kind of that street or that neighborhood or that community. And you can get a lot of security out of the metal doors, but what we do want to pay attention to is if the metal doors have glass in them. Is if somebody were to force entry through the glass, would they have access into the building? Meaning that could they reach in, unlock my locks? Could they once again step through that door, or do I design it to where now maybe I have a 5-6 inch gap in between some type of decorative kind of wrought iron, and that way they can't really step through that door. Let's take a look at the locks for a minute. Is that when we're talking about doors, typically the types of locks that we're going to see is that we're going to see either what's called a mortise lock, which is right down here, or you're going to see a deadbolt. Now, when it comes to a deadbolt, the thing that we want to look for is a 1-inch throw, and that means that when the lock extends out, you want it at least 1 inch in length, and you want to hear that clicking. The reason is that when you hear the clicking, it actually deadens that deadbolt, which means it can't be accidentally forced back inside, so you have greater security on that door. With the mortised hook latch down below is typically you also want to hear that clicking where that latch has come up and secured itself on that door. It normally will secure on another fixed kind of opening on the other side. So normally, once again, you want to look for something to where you have that clicking or that securing where that bolt has deadened. And at the same time, if you have double doors, you want to make sure that the pins go properly into the top and bottom of the door frame. Sometimes what I find is when I go out to a business is they'll have actually some type of French doors that go out to either the back of the business, and maybe the business is 3-4 years old. Well, those pins over time can start to loosen. Now you have a lot of give in that door, which means it'd be a pretty easy forced entry to get into that business. So you want to make sure that those are secured. The other thing that we look for is what is the gap in between the lock or the latch and the actual door frame. Is that with spring action latches, what I found is, especially on doing security assessments, on the inside of the business is where we come across these a lot. And if you have assets that you're protecting, is they're pretty easy to spring. The way that it's done is typically you will take some device and you will go ahead and stick it in the door frame because there's a gap, and you can actually use whether it be a screwdriver, it could be a credit card. And what happens is by springing that latch, it actually unlocks that door. Way to defeat that one is have a deadbolt in place in addition to that latch. At the same time, is a latch guard is a great feature, and the latch guard actually goes over that area so they don't have that leverage and the ability to reach something in there and spring that latch. So a latch guard is a pretty easy fix to that problem. The other thing that we want to look at with doors is we want to look at the strike plate. Most of the time, a strike plate is going to have one screw on top and one on the bottom. And your typical strike plate, which is pictured right here, normally comes with about a 1-inch screw. It's in the same grain of wood. The problem is that when it's in the same grain of wood and you're dealing with 1 inch of coverage, is that on a forced entry, if someone were to kick by that door lock, it could actually shatter the door frame, and within 1 or 2 kicks they're inside the business. What you want to do is change out that, what we call low security strike plate for a high security strike plate, which means that you have 2 screws, one on top, one on the bottom. They're offset, so it's going to go ahead and provide added security because now it's in multiple grains of wood. At the same time is get rid of the 1-inch screw, put a 2.5 to 3-inch screw in there. Now it goes into the stud of the wall and adds security to that door. The other thing is there are all types of strike plates. You can take a look at the far left there, and that one has 3 screws on top and 3 on the bottom. So depending on what assets we're protecting and what the vulnerability is we can add to this by adding more length to our strike plate. So it's a cheap fix to adding security to prevent that door kick or that forced entry. Now let's switch modes a little bit and go to windows. We talked about windows being one of the most vulnerable places within a business as far as an entry goes, is that we can do a couple things to it. One is we can take a look at what's called security window film. Security window film is a great product because you can get it clear, you can get it tinted where you do not see it. Just like the windshield of your car, it's a laminate that goes on the inside of the window, and it's of different thicknesses to where, just like in the windshield of the car, that if you have something shatter it, it stays intact. The same thing with security window film. Is basically if somebody were to take some type of device, rock, crowbar, and smash that window, it's still gonna smash, but it's gonna stay intact and stay in one piece. So they're not able to make entry into the business. Especially if you couple that with a glass break indicator, a lot of times it may activate upon that glass break, and now you get activation, you don't get entry into the business, and so you actually covered everything that you wanted to cover with your protection of your business. The other thing we can take a look at are the plastics for your windows, which are the acrylics and the polycarbonates. The nice thing about acrylics is it can be installed just like regular glass. A 1/4 inch thick piece of acrylic is about 9 to 10 times stronger than normal glass. So it's another great feature that if you have display cases, if you have windows that could be vulnerable and you're not going to go with security window film, you could go with an acrylic, a polycarbonate, and it's going to be much stronger than your normal average glass. Another thing we want to consider when we look at windows is we want to take a look at the displays that we have within those windows, and we want to move all of our valuables away from that window so we can't have the smash and grab. If you take a look at the two businesses there, you'll notice a couple things. One is that the one on the right is lit from the inside. The great thing about that is that if you and I were taking a walk down this plaza and we were to pass by these two businesses, we can see inside the one on the right, which means that if something happened to that business, we can probably see that something's happened. Maybe we see somebody inside, maybe we see that the glass is cracked, broken, at least we can see it. The one on the left, because there is no lighting, and lighting is a great deterrent to crime at nighttime, is that all of a sudden now we don't have that visibility, we don't have the ability to see inside. So some lighting, especially with today's technology and LED lights, you can actually do it very efficiently to where it's not going to cost you a whole lot, but just a little bit of lighting enough to once again illuminate shadows and see maybe what's going on inside that business. And like I said, move the merchandise away from the windows. The other thing we want to talk about is not covering up your windows. It's tough because we always want to advertise what it is that we want to sell and maybe what we have as far as what is on sale at this time. But by city code too, we do have codes that prevent us from covering windows, like in this example here. I believe by city code, it can be up to 25% when you have a window that's 3 feet in any direction. The thing is that it's a safety issue too, is that going by this business, if any of us were to drive by, could we see inside that business if something was happening? Absolutely not. At least if we only have partial coverage on that window, at least we can see in, all of our customers can see in, we can see if it's safe, our employees can see out. So as an employee inside that business, if I look into the parking lot and I see something happening, I would have the ability to maybe call the police if it didn't feel comfortable. Maybe I get ready to leave at night and I see somebody waiting by my vehicle, where if all of a sudden everything is covered and I leave that business, maybe I don't have it and see it in time and something could happen. So we always want to be aware of, once again, not covering our windows with displays and keeping those open. And we do have city code that has to do with the coverage. So we talked a little bit about target hardening, which is the hardware for windows and doors, and I want to talk a little bit about CPTED. CPTED is a term that's been around since typically the 1970s, and it was coined, it's basically crime prevention through environmental design. And what we're going to take a look at is we're going to take a look at the environment, we're going to take a look at the design, we're going to take a look at the building orientation, we're going to take a look at a lot of these things like landscaping and lighting and different things that we can add to a property or change that might reduce the chances of victimization as far as a crime goes. What we want to do is affect the mindset of people. So we'll take a look, because once again, even if I don't have an actual crime problem in my community, but somebody's afraid or has a fear of it, that is as bad as actual crime. So what we want to do is, how do we get people to feel safe? How do we get them to want to come to our area, to our business, to our downtown, to our community, to shop, to live, to do all these things that we want to bring into our community? So we'll take a look at some of this. The psychology of the criminal basically is they're going to evaluate, and like I told you before, the risk, the reward. What's the complexity of the crime, and what's my reward going to be in the long run? So if we make it harder, we make it more complex, we make them feel like they're being seen, the less likely they are to want to stay in this area because they don't feel like they belong. They feel like they stand out. And that's what we want to look at. CPTED is based on 3 overlapping concepts. It's basically access control, natural surveillance, territorial reinforcement, and maintenance. Now, we'll talk a little bit about each one of these, but when we talk about natural surveillance, think of natural surveillance as the ability to see out and the ability to see in. Is that if I look out of my business, can I see through the parking lot? Can I see down the street? And can my customers and can residents see in? Is that if all of a sudden I have overgrown landscaping or I have a big wall that covers the front entryway, is the ability for people to see into my business is limited, and all of a sudden now I lose that natural surveillance, which is almost like another security system. Is that all those people driving by, if they see something abnormal, they might get on the phone and call the police department to say, hey, there's somebody kind of hanging out by the front door, the business is closed. Kind of unusual because they're checking the doors. Compared to if all of a sudden there's overgrown landscaping and now they can't see, chances are no one's going to know what's happening, so they're not going to call. So we'll take a look at access control, we'll take a look at the natural surveillance, territorial reinforcement, and the maintenance. So when we take a look at natural surveillance and we take a look at access control, we can guide people through a space and we can create that surveillance through lighting. What we want to make sure that we do is not create a conflict between our lighting and our landscaping, to where if I put a light fixture in one part of my space and then put a tree within a few feet of it, all of a sudden now when that tree becomes a mature tree, it grows into the light fixture, and now I lose that output of light. So we always want to make sure that they're going to go together, that once again, maybe I look at some type of ground cover, I look at something that would go, and we do have city codes and things that once again, we look at planning and design and those different things that kind of help with that. We want to make sure that we don't have a conflict between the two. The other thing we want to look at is high risk areas. If we have things like ATMs, parking lots, typically ATMs and parking lots could be a higher risk because of what's occurring, the transaction of cash, people getting in and out of their car. So what we want to do is maybe our lighting as far as our foot candles or the amount of light output is a little bit greater in those areas compared to other areas like the walkways, and we want to create some uniformity between the two. Take a look at these two, and these are two different parking lots. If you had to pull your vehicle into these parking spaces, which one would you feel safer in? And I think that, yeah, without a doubt, the one on the right, you feel safe. I mean, you can see for great distances. I could park pretty much probably 100 yards away and feel like, okay, I can see everything between here and whatever business that is. I can make my way there. Where in the other one on the left, you see the one car, you have a lot of light fixtures, but you don't have a lot of light output. The type of fixture that was used in that picture or by that developer wasn't probably the appropriate one for that use of space. So now we have light spots, we have dark spots, and all of a sudden going from light to dark, we know that our eyes take time to adjust. So if I'm going out to my vehicle and all of a sudden I'm being light, dark, I might not see a threat. I might not see what is in the way between me and my vehicle. And all of a sudden now I have some liability and some issues with that. So we want to make sure that we have that uniformity, and with all the different, once again, light fixtures and placement, it's extremely important as far as where we're going to place those items. Here's another picture, and I talked briefly about landscaping. One of our Scottsdale businesses. The great thing about the desert is we have a lot of desert plants that you can see through. We have a lot of trees and things that don't take a lot of water. And if you take a look at the picture here, you can see what we recommend with landscaping, especially with mature trees, is that they're trimmed up to 7 feet. That way I can see underneath them, we can see around them, we can see by them. We also want to make sure that bushes by windows are not above windowsill height. And if I have quite a few bushes, is that if they do grow larger, in some locations that I come across, they might have oleanders that they're using to cover maybe a wall, is you want to trim those into a V shape to expose the base. That way, if somebody were to wanting to commit a crime, is that they try to hide behind that landscaping, I could see them hiding behind that oleander, and it wouldn't give them a place to cover. So once again, we want to basically bushes below windowsill height, trees up to 7 feet, and we want to be able to create that natural surveillance around that property. Security systems, cameras, we want to make sure lighting is sufficient for the business that we have. One of the problems that I see a lot is, especially when you have a front entryway into a business, they'll have a camera that shines towards the front door. The problem is, especially if I get that sun setting, coming up in the east in the morning or setting in the west, the glare that comes through the front door a lot of times will blind that camera. So now all we see is a shadow of some image coming through that front door. So when we're looking at adding surveillance cameras to our business, we want to be extremely kind of aware of the location. Once again, are we going to have glare? When is that sun coming up? Are we, facing east or west? Also, is what's the height of that camera system? Sometimes we'll get a view where we have a subject and all we see is the top of the head, nothing else. It's extremely difficult for investigation reasons that the camera may not prevent a crime, but if we can go back and use it for investigation reasons, if I can get a facial shot of somebody, then maybe we can take that back and we can start doing some facial recognition and find out if who this person is. So placement is extremely important. Also, we want to look at DVR storage. DVR storage has to do with how much can we basically store on that system that we have. Is it a 30-day loop where every 31 days now it starts a whole new loop? Or is it 15? Typically, we want to make sure that we have enough storage that will be able to hold at least 7 to 14 days minimum, 30 preferred. But the reason is that if all of a sudden, let's say I'm closed for the weekend, I come back Monday morning, something happens, maybe Friday night, I want to make sure I can go back and review that film to see. The problem with some systems is we'll get to a location where maybe they had a burglary, we'll ask a manager or somebody on site, can we get a copy of that tape? And nobody knows how to get any of the information off the DVR. So make sure that if you do get a system that they actually show you how to record and download that information, that we can get a copy, give it to the police department for investigation reasons, and now we have that. At the same time, one thing we want to be aware of is compression. Compression has to do with how much we store on that system at one time. If we want to store a lot of information, a lot of times companies will buy a system that compresses a lot of the frames. And what happens is that normally where you have frame 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, with compression you might have frame 1, frame 4, frame 8. So we lose bits and pieces of that person, that car, and it's really difficult to now go back and maybe find that license plate because we're missing it because of the compression on that system. So you want to take a look at, once again, not only the cameras and the camera placement, you want to take a look at the DVR system itself. The burglar alarms, you can add glass break, as I mentioned earlier, you can have motion sensors. And one thing that we notice is that if you place motion sensors or glass break around your business, sometimes a lot of owners have neglected the fact that where they keep the safe or where they keep other valuable items is in the middle of the business, and there are no sensors, there are no alarms on that door or motion sensors around that room. And so if all of a sudden somebody got through the entry or the back of the business and gets through the side of it, they may not be picked up. So you want to keep that in mind as to how are we securing those, once again, assets, that money, that safe, that property on the middle of the business if we have assets to protect. Video analytics is another type of software program for surveillance cameras, and what that is if I had a business where I had a lot of people in and out, or it could be a location like a library, it could be downtown Scottsdale, it could be places where, once again, kind of hard to keep track of who's doing what. Video analytics is basically software that picks out abnormal behavior. So rather than all of a sudden having to sit there and watch every person the whole time, which is difficult to do, what it's going to do is it's going to pick out somebody who's reaching quickly into a bag, somebody who's leaving a backpack behind. It's going to be able to, and you can set some boundaries for what it is that you want to be picked up. And it's great when you have a business where you have people coming in and out on a regular basis. Fuse boxes. Fuse boxes is another thing, especially if I have a business that is freestanding. Maybe, as I mentioned earlier, I have a business that I bought an old house, it's restoring it. A lot of times fuse boxes in Arizona are on the outside of the business. So one thing we want to do is lock that fuse box. Typically we have one side that's ours, we have one side that's the power company secures their side, we can secure ours. As far as the police department, the fire department go, is if we need to gain access to it, we have bolt cutters, we will cut it off, we will shut it off if we have to. So don't worry about us. What we want to do is kind of keep in mind that if somebody shut the power off, if I have a business where maybe I'm closed on the weekend, what's the length of my battery backup on my security system? Is it 24 hours, 48, 72? So one of the things we want to ask our security company is what is the battery backup length of time that thing will operate if I have a loss of power? And if I have a loss of power, will I be notified? If my phone line is my main source for my security system, if my phone line were to go down, would I be notified that we have an interruption in your service? At least now as a business owner, I can go out there and see what the problem is, get a hold of the phone company, we can fix the phone line. Or if I have a wireless GSM type security system, then once again, has something happened that's not transmitting the signal, and so now we need to get somebody out from the security company to take care of that problem. The broken windows theory, the way that works is in 1982, Wilson and Kelling were two social scientists, and they went out and they studied crime. And what they found is that if one building had one broken window and we let that window as is, we didn't fix it, kind of let it be, is that a couple days later maybe there's 2 broken windows. A week later maybe there's 5 broken windows. Same thing with trash. If all of a sudden we as a city or we as a location, maybe on my business, I allow trash to just kind of hang out in the parking lot. I have maybe a cleaning company that comes once a week, so I don't do a whole lot about it. Pretty soon if somebody sees that, they might go, if they don't care, then I don't care. Now they put more trash. So what the broken windows theory is that if we allow these things that are broken basically to remain broken, then crime will flourish. So if we have that graffiti, let's get it removed right away. We have that broken window, let's go ahead and fix it. We have lights that are out, let's replace them. We have trees that are overgrown. Let's trim them up to 7 feet, bushes into a V shape or below windowsill height. The more we do to maintain our property, it sends a signal out to those would-be criminals to say, all of you that are welcome, those that want to abide by the law, you're more than welcome to come on in. Those that don't want to, you're not welcome here. So it tells them that you have ownership, you have territoriality, that you care about your property. So it sends a great message. Don't invite them back. And this would be that if we do nothing, if we've ever been victimized and we do nothing about our property and we just kind of expect that, hey, it's not going to happen to me, we kind of turn the other way, chances are we could be the next target. What we want to do is that I tell people it's not about being paranoid, it's about being aware. We have a great city, we have a safe city, but we always have to lock everything up. We need to secure our valuables, close our garage doors, lock those doors and those windows, set the security system. Everything that we do is going to be sending that signal that if somebody's looking in that window today, that they go, you know what? I'm not choosing this business because it's much too hard. I'll go somewhere else. Cash drawers, cash registers, when you close your business for the day, if you have a cash register that is visible, and even if not, it's a great idea to go ahead and put that money in a safe, out of sight, out of mind, leave the drawer open. So that way a passerby would see that the drawer is open, there's no money in this business for me to go in and take that risk. So now at least I don't have to deal with the window smash because they wanted to see if there was money in that cash register. Safes, if we have a safe within the business, it's best to anchor it to the foundation. And if we can't anchor it to the foundation, maybe to the studs of the wall, so it's not something that could be picked up and taken out of the business. Keep items that could be used as steps away from walls and fences. I mentioned sometimes pallets. A lot of times pallets can be stacked up next to a business or a wall. There's also sometimes landscaping. If I have a tree that's within a few feet of my exterior wall, then it could be a reason or a place for someone to actually gain access to my business where they could climb it and then scale my wall to get into my courtyard or my business. So those are some things to kind of keep in mind is what am I giving them access to that they could use as a tool. Business Watch. Just like Neighborhood Watch, the best thing that we can do for crime prevention, in addition to all the target hardening and the CEP-TED strategies, is look out for each other. Is that so many times, all of you know who belongs, who doesn't belong. You know who maybe what time the business is open next door, maybe what time the staff gets there. Where as a patrol officer, I could be driving by, maybe I see somebody at the back of your door at 3 a.m., the guy waves, I wave, looks like he belongs, yet all of a sudden you know that the business doesn't open until 5 and that's the first time someone shows up. So one thing we want to talk about is that if we look out for each other, we create a business watch within our plaza or within our little business group. We can share emails, we can talk about, hey, we have an issue with lighting, I contacted the property owner, they're going to come out and fix this light fixture, and now we kind of know what's going on with each other. At the same time, maybe I have somebody who shows up at my business, they go ahead, they walk in my business, they don't really buy anything, but they're kind of looking for do I have cameras, or looking and asking weird questions. Now I can send that out to all my business owners and say, hey guys, just to let you know, I had this guy come in today, he asked some really weird questions, and here's what he asked, here's a description. So now at least as a neighboring business, so I can kind of keep an eye on to see if we see him in the community. All right, here's my contact information, and my number's 480-312-5696. or by email at ksneed@scottsdaleaz.gov.
Well, good afternoon and thanks for being here. My name is Jim Ford. I'm Deputy Chief and Fire Marshal for City of Scottsdale. And what I'm going to do is briefly go over some of the services that we provide on the fire department and what you can expect to get from us when it comes to service levels. We like to call this Scottsdale Fire 101, and this is a very quick, like I said, overview of what we're going to talk about. Here's kind of what we're going to cover today. A little bit about the history of the fire department. We're a little bit unique as far as other municipal fire departments go. Some of our accomplishments and some of our major programs like automatic aid, the infrastructure that we have in place, how we've grown over the years, and then our department priorities. We'll talk a little bit about community risk, we'll talk a little bit about community wellness and our outreach programs of what you can access from the fire department to help make you safer and reduce that community risk. First off, by the numbers, this is what we did last year. This is, everybody likes to, with police and fire, say, show us what you're doing, show us what you're up to. So this is it, almost 30,000 emergency calls for us. Fire investigations, those are working fires where we did the cause and origin. Number of apparatus, you can read sworn and civilian personnel. Public interactions, we're very big, as you can understand today, with public interactions and outreach. We like to prevent the incident. And if we know we're going to have fires, we know we're going to have incidents, but we want to secondarily reduce the impact of those incidents, whether it's you as a business owner, or whether you as a resident or as a visitor that comes to the city. Volunteers, we're very large with our volunteers. In fact, they give us about the equivalent of almost 3.5 to 4 extra people a year, and a lot of the stuff we couldn't do if we didn't have the volunteers to assist us with that. And then on the small business owners, the building inspections. You'll work an awful lot with our Fire and Life Safety Division and our fire inspections. If you do any type of remodel, if you're opening a new business, that type of stuff, you're going to see one of my fire investigators, one of my fire inspectors that's going to come help you with that. The first thing I want to talk about is, just so that you know how we work here, in the city of Scottsdale and in the Valley, we are part of what's called the automatic aid system. And what that is an agreement between all of the cities and all of the fire departments in the Valley that if something occurs, the closest, most appropriate unit is going to go. So what that also means is that we have an almost unlimited amount of resources for major incidents, because it's hard to staff up and it's hard to pay for enough resources when we have a big fire or a very large incident, a downplane or something like that. So by the automatic aid system, no boundaries as far as the fire is concerned, no boundaries as far as emergency response is concerned. So all of those dots on that, that's the Valley with the different cities represented as different colors. Every one of those dots is a fire station. Every one of those fire stations have apparatus and firefighters and chiefs in them. And we can, in theory, call apparatus all the way from Glendale into Scottsdale, vice versa. If Scottsdale has that type of an incident for the Super Bowl or something, our units can respond all the way over there to help them, all the way to the west, Buckeye, all the way to the east, Apache Junction. So this system is unique to the fire service in the United States, and it's also the second biggest initial emergency response system only to fire department in New York. Second biggest in the country because of the way that we work this out. Our firefighters are all trained the same. Our chief officers all operate a fire incident very similar to the same way. All of that was done on purpose with no cost, no anything. This is how it's going to work. So a quick example of how that works is, if you're in your business and you happen to be at Scottsdale and Indian School and an incident comes out, if it's an emergency medical incident, all of our trucks will send one truck, 4 firefighters, 2 of those are paramedics. If a Scottsdale truck is closest, it automatically goes. We have the automatic vehicle locators on it. If a Phoenix truck happens to be in service and happens to be driving down and sitting at the intersection of Scottsdale and Indian School, that Phoenix truck will get dispatched. No questions asked, that truck will go there. So that happens quite a bit in Scottsdale because we have Scottsdale Memorial Hospital, a level 1 trauma center. We have Mesa, Phoenix, Tempe trucks coming in and out all the time. Same thing, if we happen to be in Phoenix for anything and an incident comes out, our truck will automatically get dispatched. It gets the resources that the citizens and the businesses need faster without any of the political side effects. So it's working very well. Has worked very well for us here in Scottsdale for a long time. We've been a part of that system since 2005. This is just a quick overview. We color the maps in based on number of responses. The city of Scottsdale is set up kind of like a big aircraft carrier. We're long, we're narrow, we have different things. So different parts of the city will require different amounts of resources. The northern part of the city is a little less dense. There's some bigger houses up there, some longer distances for us to travel, and we don't have the call volume up there, which is the lighter shades. But if you get down into the southern part of the city, down here where we're at now, we're very busy. We're very busy, especially with the downtown, especially with the population densities. The houses are smaller, the lots are smaller, so we have more resources down here. The second thing we'll talk a little bit about later is we have more built-in protection in the north part of the city than we do in the south part of the city. South part of the city is older. The fire risk is a little higher just because of the age of the structures. But that shows, and that's every year we look at that. We're constantly updating that to see if we need to move resources around or not. And that's how we cover the city, is saying our goal is to try to get on an emergency response, get the first unit there within 4 to 5 minutes, 80% of the time. And that 4 to 5 minutes is critical because it works both for fires and it works both for medical calls. So that 4 or 5 minute time is our goal, to get there about 80% of the time. And we can do that based on where we put our resources. Okay? So that just shows how we're busy and where we're busy. The auto aid system, in essence that is the Phoenix Dispatch Center, and there's a Mesa Dispatch Center that are interconnected. We're dispatched by Phoenix, and we pay them for that service. If we don't pay them, we have to provide it ourselves, and Scottsdale Police has a dispatch center. We'd have to increase their center. But for $1.4 million a year, we get access to all those resources that I was talking about. All of the dispatch, all of the trucks from all over the valley, all of the training, we work through all that. So for the cost of 1.4 is about the cost of one fire station. So instead of building one extra fire station in Scottsdale, we get dispatched and we get the resources of another 200 fire stations. So it's a very good cost savings for the city, works well for us. And again, it's less than the cost of one fire station. If we tried to cover everything that we need to get everywhere in the city in 4 minutes, we'd have to add 10 or 11 new fire stations just to cover the north part of the city, and that doesn't count the preserve. That just counts the built-on areas. So this has worked out very well for us, and the resources that we have access to is a very good benefit for the city and for our budgets. So here's our priorities. City of Scottsdale, we're talking about what do we do on the fire side. And our mission statement, our motto is, we care for you. And sometimes the police agree with this, sometimes they don't, but if it's not a police issue, it's ours, okay? If it's not bullets and bad guys and it's not police, we'll take it. Medical calls, public assist, any of those types of things, we'll do it. And we'll try and stop that incident from occurring. We'll try and stop the loss, whatever that might be. So we're willing to do that. So we care for you, that's it. If there's an issue, and it's an issue for you as a resident or a business owner, give us a call and we'll come and see what we can do. Again, that can be anything from snake calls. I don't know if you saw the TV the other day, there was a big issue, a big report on snakes are out again, and the cameras went with our crews and caught a bunch of snakes that were in some houses, so we'll do that. A lot of the fire departments around the country won't do that, but we'll do that all the way to car accidents, heart attacks, stroke, fires, brush fires, structure fires. All of that, the whole gamut, we're prepared to handle. So that's the whole thing. Where do we put our stations? Where do we do our staffing? Our staffing is 4 persons. 2 of them are advanced life support, because about 80% of our calls are medical calls, emergency medical. So 2 of those are paramedics that are tied directly to the hospital, to our medical director and emergency rooms. So those guys can provide advanced medical care before you get to the hospital. Emergency medical systems changes. We're still obviously always looking at that. There's going to be some changes because of the Affordable Care Act. Are people going to start using us more than going to the hospitals and instead of their doctors? All of those things play in. So we're going to have to be able to change, especially if we're going to provide this type of service. And then a healthy, sustainable workforce. It's difficult to be a police or fire officer for a long period of time. When you get old like I am, it's time to replace me with the young guys and get the young guys in there. That's who you want coming to your calls, is the guys that have been around and have that training and have those skills. The budgets and bonds, it's always a challenge to get resources. At capital projects, if you've been in the city, you understand how that's gone the last couple of years. The biggest system out for us right now is our radio system enhancements. We're still working on, we can talk to all the other fire departments, but we're still not all on the same channels. The police are ahead of us a little bit on that. On the 800 system, the fire has been dragging a little bit, but we're getting up on that 800 system, and those are some tremendous costs that the city understands. Those are bond issues or they're capital projects issues. So if we don't have bonds, we have to do it with capital projects, and the city manager and the city financial folks are working on that. But those are some pretty hefty dollars. And then department infrastructures. Where do we need new stations and when do we need to put those stations in, based on the call volume, based on the locations? When I started, we had 3 fire stations in the city of Scottsdale. We now have 15 fire stations in the city of Scottsdale, and we have sites. 2 of those are temporary, and we need to turn those into permanent sites, but then we have 1 more site that we're going to end up building. We'll end up with 16 fire stations in the city of Scottsdale if the current zoning and that stays the same. But the city is turned into a pretty big enterprise just on the fire side. And then the legislative issues and how that impacts you as a small business. Locally, we can pass, because of the size of our city, we can pass laws and ordinances and codes that take care of what's going to happen in our jurisdiction. But the second part of that, and we'll talk a little bit about it, is state regulations. And the whole issue in Arizona is of local control. So as an example, the city of Scottsdale, we pass our own fire code. And our fire code that's going to apply to all the businesses and all the residents and everything we build is the 2012 Uniform or International Fire Code. Okay, the 2012 International Fire Code, we make local amendments to that, and those local amendments all apply. We pass a new fire code about once every 3 years. You're covered by the fire code that you were under when your place was built, unless you make remodels and changes, okay? So as a business owner, understand that. Some of the safety stuff, we'll work with you and modify on that. As an example, in Scottsdale, one of the local ordinances or local amendments that we made that was huge for the city of Scottsdale occurred in 1985. And in 1985, our city council supported the recommendations and passed an ordinance that basically said, starting January 1st of 1986, if you build in this city, you're going to put built-in fire protection, which is sprinklers and alarms and the whole bit. There's still very few cities in the country that do that. We will sprinkle every new house, we'll sprinkle every new apartment complex, we'll sprinkle every new commercial building. Basically, we're saying if you're adding risk to our community, we're going to put in what we know is the best level of fire protection. And we've done that since 1985. And so what that means now is somewhere in the range of 85% or so of our commercial businesses have sprinklers. So check yours if you have them, or whether you have them or not. Okay, and then also over 50%, it's about 55, 58% of our single family homes have sprinklers in them, which allows us to look at the north and not the calls and have the bigger fires up there, the residential fires. And then on multifamily, it's probably around 70% of our multifamily units have residential sprinklers or have some type of sprinkler system. So that by itself was a breakwater event for Scottsdale because again, that controlled how we were going to grow and how safe we were going to be. It controlled our future risk. Now, as a small business, if you do a major remodel, if you're not sprinklered or you're not protected, that's okay. We'll work with you on what safety items you should address and your exiting and that type of thing. But if you do a major remodel, understand that remodel will kick you into, now you have to protect that building. Okay, so that's when it comes back to us. State regulations, there's been a pretty big discussion down at the state legislature the last few years on who has control. And in the past, the city the size of Scottsdale was almost autonomous on what we could pass in our control. We set the codes and the safety levels for our city. More and more with the state legislature, they think that they should set the rules for the city of Scottsdale instead of letting it be local. And I'll give you one quick example of that is for years, forever and ever in Arizona, you weren't allowed to use fireworks. Consumer fireworks were banned throughout the state. A few years ago, the state decided that we needed to allow consumer fireworks even though we're a desert and even though the 4th of July is during our highest time of fire danger. They decided we needed to do that. So the ordinance that they passed, the legislation they passed said, you have to be able to sell fireworks throughout the state, but a local jurisdiction can restrict the use. So Scottsdale and our city council said, okay, we'll restrict the use. You can't use consumer fireworks in Scottsdale. This past legislative session, the legislature decided that Scottsdale no longer knew what was good for us, and so they decided that now you can use and sell fireworks in the city of Scottsdale, and we can't restrict it by local ordinance anymore. So that's an example of local control, where instead of letting our politicians and our local politicians and our leaders make those decisions, we're getting directives from the state. And how that's important for us is a third of our city is a preserve. Okay, about 60 square miles is a preserve. And with that preserve, that's a jewel for us. And we have a lot of issues and a lot of challenges protecting that, whether it's from hikers or from wildland fire or that type of stuff. But we just put that at risk. And some of the biggest fires in Arizona history started in Scottsdale. 2005, 1995, some very large fires started in the city of Scottsdale and then burned north to the mountains. And so the thought with the legislature is that wildland fire is only an issue up in the desert, or not in the desert, but up in the mountains, and that's just not the case. So when we run into state legislation and we run into local legislation, we like to control it locally, and then that allows you as a local business owners to deal with your local politicians and say whether this is a good idea or not. But that's a huge challenge for us as we go forward. I was talking about the codes and ordinances again. We try to get to all your businesses at least once every 3 years with an engine company. And if it's a target hazard, which is a high hazard, you should see a fire inspector once a year. Okay, high hazard, target hazards are bars and nightclubs, hazardous materials locations, those types of things. But we try to get to the existing buildings because again, we're going to try and stop the incident before it occurs. And then if it does occur, we're going to try and reduce the impact. And that's where we'll work with you as the business owner to look at your specific facility and decide what's going on there. The city just passed a local ordinance that said if you are a bar or a nightclub, we want you to work with the police and fire and get additional safety training with police and fire. It's a 3-hour class that they have to attend, and they have to submit a plan so that we can evaluate it and make sure that we don't have a bar or nightclub fire like they've had around other parts of the country where we have a huge impact on our community. But that's a local ordinance that was passed by our council with support of our bar and nightclub industry in Scottsdale. But we're willing to do that, and we're willing to give that training. Community outreach, this is just some of the things that we try to get out into the community. There's so many things, and I know I'm talking a little quick on some of this, but there's so many things that you can access. CPR, constant compression training. The majority of people that have bystander CPR done on them have a much better chance of surviving than if they don't. And now you don't even have to do the mouth-to-mouth. Everybody goes, oh, I don't want to do mouth-to-mouth. Well, you don't even have to do that anymore. And until you do some type of action, until our firefighters get there, has a much better chance. Smoke alarms, we'll talk about smoke alarms for residential and commercial. Drowning prevention, and drowning is a big issue for us in the valley and in the state. Senior locks boxes, homeowners associations. If you're part of a homeowner association, let us know and we'll come talk to you about everything that we're talking about here. Residential sprinklers, wildland urban interface, defensible space, all of that stuff. We will come, if you have a commercial association that you want to talk to us about what the fire department provides, we'll be happy to come talk to that. Anytime we're invited, we show up. And then self-assessment, we keep looking at what we do. And I didn't mention this under history, but in 2005, we switched from a private fire service to the City of Scottsdale Municipal Fire Service. So in reality, we're only 8 years old. Scottsdale Fire Department is only 8 years old. Police Department has us by what, 42 years or something like that? They're a little older than we are. But part of that is we did a major startup in 2005. We've made some pretty major changes with additions to stations and movement of stations, but there's a constant self-assessment going on, and we can't complete that self-assessment without input from the business community and from our residents. So we want to hear from you if there's something that we're doing or not doing that we need to look at. Let us know, and we can do that self-assessment. There's an actual national process called accreditation that we're getting set to probably go through that. Whether or not that helps us or not, we'll have to find out. We think that it will. Anytime you evaluate and measure things get better. So here's what we're trying to cover in Scottsdale. Aside from our business, aside from our residents, these are some of the things. We are a destination community. Okay, I don't care how you look at it, Scottsdale is a destination community. And we hope that's good for you as the business owners and business people in the city. But we got the Phoenix Open. Last year we brought in a little over 500,000 people, I think, and that number will probably go up with the Super Bowl coming up this year. I put the 2015 Super Bowl on there. They also gave us the 2015 Pro Bowl. So for January, police and fire are going to be very busy because we start right after the first of the year and we'll run through the auto auctions, the Barrett-Jackson, Russo Steel auto auctions, Gooding auto auctions, the horse shows, the Arabian horse shows, you know, all of those types of things at Westworld. And spring training, you know, there's a lot of people that come here for spring training. So we're going to be very busy the first of the year, but we have to be able to provide those services, both emergency and non-emergency, for that influx of people. And that's one of the things that the state legislature I mentioned earlier we look at. They look at our permanent population. They don't look that we're going to bring in, I think it's somewhere between 6 and 8 million people a year will visit Scottsdale. So we get to protect our normal residential full-time folks, but we also have to protect all of those visitors. And so everything we do is based on that, knowing that we're going to be that big or that busy of a city. And then again, our entertainment district, I talked about that before. There's a special ordinance that the city council passed in conjunction with the police and fire to make that a good event. Make sure if somebody comes, they come to our entertainment district, they have a good experience. We don't want big events happening and people say, don't go to Scottsdale because of this. We're working with those folks to do it. So there's a lot of reasons for that. There's a lot of examples where that works or doesn't work. Oops. I think that's it. And again, my name's Jim Ford. I didn't put up a screen like Kory did on how to contact us. I'll give you that information at 480-312-1855 is our main fire prevention or fire and life safety number. And you can call that number specifically to inspections or things that you want to do for your business. But for any reason, if you call that number, we will get you to the right person, just like Kory was saying earlier. But access us, ask us questions. We have a lot of stuff we can give you. And again, we'll be happy to talk to you or individually or as a group anytime that opportunity comes up.
Thank you for taking care of your business in Scottsdale. Scottsdale's Economic Development Department can help your business grow strong in one of the nation's most dynamic cities. For more information, visit choosescottsdale.com or call 480-312-7989.